So you get used to a kind of thing, but nothing is like the Oscar, you know.
The headline is designed to stop the scroll. It promises a revelation that fits a cynical view of Hollywood. Al Pacino, now 85, finally revealed the 7 actors he despised. It is a claim that spreads rapidly because it confirms a specific fantasy about the entertainment industry, that behind the awards and the applause, there is only jealousy. We assume that in an environment defined by extreme competition, egos must be fragile and resentment must be permanent. The narrative suggests that a man like Pacino, after decades of fighting for roles, would naturally harbor a secret list of enemies. But a close examination of the record suggests a different reality. In 2024, Pacino appeared at New York's 92nd Street Y for a public conversation. During this event, he was confronted with the very rumors that have defined his reputation in the tabloids. He was asked about old feuds, about lingering bitterness, and about the idea that he has spent his life keeping score. His answers did not align with the clickbait. They did not provide the vindication that online algorithms reward. Instead, Pacino's reflections offer a case study in how the public projects drama onto figures who may not actually feel it. The truth of his career is not found in a list of adversaries, but in a series of complex, often misunderstood relationships with his peers and his craft. To understand the man, we must look past the viral headlines and examine the specific productions where conflict was rumored and where it actually occurred. We will break down these relationships through the lens of 6 specific films. These are the projects where the myths of rivalry were born and where the reality of his creative process was forged. This is the actual record of Al Pacino's conflicts, from the minor misalignments to the defining relationships of his life. Number 6, Arthur Hiller. We begin with a film that has largely faded from the cultural memory, yet it provides one of the clearest examples of what actual conflict looks like in Pacino's career. The movie is Author, released in 1982.
You mean to tell me that you lied to me, to everybody? Told them we had this superstar, right? And we didn't.
By the early 1980s, Pacino was navigating a difficult transition. He had established himself as the intense, dramatic anchor of 1970s cinema, but the new decade demanded something different. Author was an attempt at comedy, a genre that required a rhythm and lightness that often contradicted his method-heavy training. The film was a critical and commercial failure, torn apart by reviewers who felt the casting was a fundamental mismatch. In the years following its release, the failure of the film became a quiet point of contention. The viral narrative would suggest that Pacino blamed his co-stars or the studio for the disaster. A hate list mentality would require him to deflect responsibility and attack those around him. But his actual reflection on the project reveals a different target. Pacino has been open about the friction on set, but he does not frame it as a personal vendetta. He directed his criticism toward the director, Arthur Hiller. In his memoir, Pacino wrote, "The film's director, Arthur Hiller, and I were not what you would call in sync. It is important to analyze that specific choice of words, not in sync. He does not use the language of hatred. He does not accuse Hiller of incompetence or malice. He describes a lack of alignment. In the high-stakes machinery of filmmaking, the relationship between an actor and a director is the engine. When that engine falls out of alignment, the vehicle stalls." Pacino's description suggests a professional disconnect, a disagreement on tone, timing, and the fundamental approach to the material. The internet often conflates creative disagreement with personal animosity. It assumes that if 2 people struggle to work together, they must despise one another. But Pacino's retrospective suggests that you can have a failed collaboration without a personal war. He critiques the chemistry. He acknowledges the failure, but he stops short of building a villain. This distinction is crucial because it sets the pattern for how he discusses almost all of his conflicts. They are rarely about the people. They're about the work. Number 5, William Friedkin. If Author was a case of professional misalignment, the 1980 thriller Cruising was a case of open warfare.
Yeah, you're kidding. I know it.
No.
No? Well, you got the wrong guy, I guess. That's all.
But again, the target of the conflict was not a fellow actor. Cruising was controversial from the moment it was announced. It was a dark, polarizing film set in the underground subculture of New York City, and the production was besieged by protests and external pressure. Inside the production, the atmosphere was equally volatile. Pacino has since admitted that he never felt comfortable with the role or the project. In his memoir Sonny Boy, Pacino abandoned the diplomatic language entirely regarding this experience. He wrote, "Of course, the director hated my guts. He just seemed to have it in for me from the start." The director was William Friedkin, a filmmaker known for his aggressive, confrontational style. Friedkin, who had directed The French Connection and The Exorcist, was not a man who coddled actors. He operated with a level of intensity that matched, and often clashed with, Pacino's own process. Friedkin himself spoke openly about the tension before his death. He told The Wrap that Pacino gave me a rough time. He wasn't on time and often didn't know what we were doing on a particular day. This is the closest Pacino's career comes to a confirmed feud. Yet even here, the dynamics do not fit the narrative of a hate list of actors. This was a clash of two powerful auteurs. It was a power struggle between a director who demanded absolute control and a lead actor who felt adrift and unsupported. Friedkin described a lack of preparation. Pacino described a lack of support. These are the grievances of the workplace. They are the sparks that fly when two perfectionists with incompatible methods are forced into a pressure cooker. Pacino acknowledges the friction bluntly. He describes the sensation of being disliked by his director. He describes the frustration of the environment, but he frames it as a difficult chapter in a long career, not as a source of eternal resentment. He has said he regrets making the film, but regret is an internal emotion. It is a reflection on one's own choices. It is distinct from the external projection of rage. The cruising chapter proves that Pacino is capable of conflict and capable of holding a grudge against a process, but it reinforces the idea that his difficulties were almost exclusively vertical, directed at the management of the film rather than horizontal, directed at his peers. Number 4, Dustin Hoffman. We move now to a film that Al Pacino was not even in, yet it defines one of the most persistent comparisons of his life. The film is Midnight Cowboy, and the actor is Dustin Hoffman.
The two basic items necessary to sustain life are sunshine and coconut milk.
For decades, the media has attempted to manufacture a rivalry between Pacino and Hoffman. On paper, the narrative was perfect. They were the two titans of their generation. Both were diminutive, intense, ethnic actors from New York. Both rose to prominence in the late 1960s and early 1970s, both trained in the same method acting traditions. Critics loved to pair them. Film legend Pauline Kael once wrote that Pacino and Hoffman were almost indistinguishable, two sides of the same acting coin. In Hollywood, this kind of constant comparison is usually a recipe for toxicity. It invites the actors to view one another as existential threats. Every role Hoffman won was a role Pacino lost, and vice versa. The industry incentives were set up to create enemies. But the reality of their relationship, as detailed in Pacino's 2024 memoir, defies this expectation. He addresses the Hoffman comparison directly, and he does so with a clarity that disarms the rumors. "I didn't dare compare myself to him," Pacino wrote. "I loved him in The Graduate and as Ratso Rizzo in Midnight Cowboy. I always thought Dustin was a brilliant actor, but I didn't feel we were on similar wavelengths." This statement is remarkable for its lack of ego. He does not claim superiority. He does not claim to have been robbed of roles. Instead, he expresses a quiet confidence in his own identity. By stating that they were not on similar wavelengths, he rejects the premise of the competition entirely. He suggests that while the world saw them as interchangeable, he saw them as distinct artists doing different work. There is a profound security in that perspective. It requires a strong sense of self to look at one's biggest rival and see only a colleague to be admired. Pacino credits Hoffman's work in Midnight Cowboy not with jealousy but with appreciation. This dynamic poses a question to the listener. When the world compares you to someone else, do you respond with competition or clarity? Pacino chose clarity. He understood that Hoffman's success did not diminish his own. This refusal to engage in the rivalry narrative is likely why the feud never materialized in reality, despite decades of headlines trying to will it into existence. Number 3. Diane Keaton. The third film on our list represents a relationship that is far more personal and far more revealing of Pacino's character. It is The Godfather Part 2, the era where his bond with Diane Keaton was solidified.
I see. I'm supposed to stay in my house.
No, the compound will be fine.
Tom, I was going to take the children to New England next week.
While the tabloids of the 1970s focused heavily on the romantic aspect of their relationship, the enduring story is one of profound mutual influence. Keaton and Pacino met during the filming of the first Godfather movie. They were both young, both uncertain, and both thrust into the center of a cultural phenomenon. If Pacino were the type of man to harbor resentments, the end of a high-profile relationship would be the fertile ground for it. A bitter separation often leads to silence or subtle disparagement. But Pacino's public statements regarding Keaton have never wavered from a tone of absolute reverence. When Keaton passed away in 2025, Pacino released a statement that stripped away all celebrity pretense. He did not issue a generic press release, he spoke with vulnerability. "Diane was my partner, my friend, someone who brought me happiness and on more than one occasion influenced the direction of my life," he wrote. The phrase "influenced the direction of my life" is significant. It is an admission of impact. It acknowledges that he was shaped by her, that he is who he is in part because of her. He went on to say, "The memories remain vivid, and with her passing they have returned with a force that is both painful and moving." This is not the language of a man who keeps a list of enemies. It is the language of a man who understands the weight of human connection. At her AFI Lifetime Achievement ceremony years prior, Pacino stood on stage and told her simply, "I love you forever." The viral videos that claim Pacino exposes people rely on the image of an aging gladiator finally throwing punches. But the reality of his connection to Keaton shows us an aging artist embracing gratitude. The hate list theory collapses when faced with the genuine warmth he holds for the people who actually mattered in his life. He remembers the energy she brought to their work, describing her as someone who lived without limits. This relationship serves as a counter-argument to the cynical view of Hollywood. It suggests that amidst the noise and the pressure, genuine bonds can survive. Pacino did not survive 8 decades in the industry by burning bridges. He survived by being held up by the people he loved and who loved him in return. Number 2. Robert De Niro. If there is one relationship that the internet has tried hardest to turn into a war, it is his relationship with Robert De Niro. The film that brought them face to face was Heat. Released in 1995. For 20 years prior to Heat, Pacino and De Niro were the twin pillars of American acting. They had both starred in The Godfather Part 2, but in separate timelines, never sharing the screen. The anticipation for their first scene together was immense. The media narrative was set. This was the heavyweight championship. It was a battle for dominance. But the history of their relationship paints a picture of collaboration, not combat. They met long before the fame in the gritty New York theater scene of the late 1960s. Pacino has described their early dynamic as one of shared struggle. They were two young men dealing with rejection, auditions, and the intensity of a city that didn't care if they succeeded. Pacino recalled, "We got together early on, and we shared something which was a big thing at the time. That something was the hunger to be taken seriously as artists." De Niro remembered seeing a young Pacino on the street and being struck by his presence, his charisma. When they finally sat across from each other in the diner scene in Heat, the tension on screen was electric. But off-screen, the dynamic was anchored in trust. In a 2019 profile, Pacino explained their enduring friendship with a single word: trust. "We get together, and there's a trust there. There just is," he said. He described their relationship as a safe harbor where they could kibitz and ask for feedback. Consider how rare this is. Two legends operating at the absolute peak of their profession, still asking each other for advice. If Pacino were driven by ego, De Niro would be his natural enemy. De Niro is the only other actor who occupies the same historical space. Yet Pacino views him as a peer, a confidant, and a friend. The idea that Pacino hates his competitors ignores the evidence of this 50-year friendship. Longevity in Hollywood is difficult enough. Maintaining a friendship through 5 decades of fame is nearly impossible without a foundation of deep, genuine respect. The Heat dynamic proves that Pacino views his peers not as obstacles to be removed, but as the only other people who can truly understand his experience. Number 1. Marlon Brando. We arrive at the number 1 source of rumors, the film that started it all and the origin of the most persistent myth about Pacino's resentment: The Godfather.
You spend time with your family?
Sure I do.
Good. Because a man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
The story has been retold in forums and video essays for years. It goes like this. In 1973, Al Pacino boycotted the Academy Awards. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for his role as Michael Corleone. The narrative claims he was furious because Marlon Brando, who had less screen time, was nominated for, and eventually won, Best Actor. The story alleges that Pacino felt slighted, jealous, and bitter, that his massive contribution to the film was categorized as supporting, while Brando took the glory. It is a perfect story. It has a villain, the Academy, a victim, Pacino, and a motive, jealousy. But in his 2024 conversations, Pacino dismantled this myth with a laugh. When asked if he was upset about the category placement, he replied, "How does a story like that get out? I wasn't upset, are you kidding me?" He explained that he had heard the rumor up the grapevine over the years, but that it had no basis in reality. His absence from the ceremony was not a calculated protest against Brando. It was a reflection of his general discomfort with the machinery of stardom at that time. He was a young theater actor, overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught of global fame, creating distance for his own sanity, not out of spite. Furthermore, Pacino's feelings toward Brando have always been documented as respectful. He has said he has nothing but nice things to say about Brando, as well as his other co-stars like James Caan and Robert Duvall. He acknowledges that they didn't become best friends who spoke every day, but he characterizes the relationship as professional. This reveals the core misunderstanding of the hate list viral claim. The internet confuses distance with hatred. It assumes that if actors are not performing friendship for the cameras, they must be enemies. Pacino admits to professional distance. He admits that he didn't form deep emotional bonds with everyone. But he rejects the leap to resentment. The dismantling of the Godfather myth is the final nail in the coffin of the hate list theory. If the foundational story of his bitterness, the one involving the greatest actor of his era and the biggest movie of his life, is false, then the rest of the narrative crumbles with it. So, we return to the question that started this investigation. Did 85-year-old Al Pacino finally reveal the 7 actors he despised? The answer is a definitive no. There is no list. There is no confession. The viral headlines are a fabrication, designed to exploit our cynicism about famous people. But the truth we found is far more interesting than the lie. The real story of Al Pacino is not about a man settling scores. It is about a man who has navigated a brutal industry with a surprising amount of grace. He praises Dustin Hoffman when he could have competed with him. He thanks Francis Ford Coppola for fighting for him when the studio wanted him fired. He maintains a half-century of trust with Robert De Niro. He mourns Diane Keaton with vulnerability. He laughs at his own string of Oscar losses, joking, "You broke my streak," when he finally won for Scent of a Woman. This is not the behavior of a man consumed by the past. It is the behavior of an artist who understands that the work is what matters. Why do we want to believe the hate list exists? Perhaps because it makes the legends seem smaller. It brings them down to our level of petty grievances. But Pacino refuses to play that role. He refuses to be the villain in the story of his own life. In the end, the most powerful revelation from Al Pacino isn't a list of names he hates. It's the fact that after 50 years at the top of the world, he still prefers to talk about gratitude. And that is a legacy that will outlast any viral headline.